If you were to create a language, how would you do it? Is it even possible to create a fully writable, readable, speakable, comprehensible language? Yes, it is. It's already been done. It's called Lojban. In 1955, there was a theory floating around called the Whorf Hypothesis. It said that language controls, or at least influences, how we think, including our freedom of thought. This was explored in the book 1984, where a dystopian society is forced to speak a new language called Newspeak. The oppressive government uses this language to control people by restricting their freedom of thought. If you don't have a word for a concept in a language, it's very hard to comprehend that subject. But what if you had a language that was designed to increase your freedom of thought? Well, in 1955, Dr. James Cook Brown decided to test this out with a language called Loglan, which means logical language. This experiment was later improved upon and formed into a more updated language in 1987 called Lojban, which also means logical language. Many philosophers predict that we will be using logical, constructed languages of some kind like this in the future. Why? Well, the languages we use today are known as natural languages. They came to be naturally and evolved over thousands of years of time, and as such, they're kind of crappy. Think about the words two, and two. If I just say two, you have no idea which two I'm talking about. And it's not just English. English is bad, but the other languages have their share of problems too, because no one sat down and thought them out. But they have thought out constructed languages. And while there are a few other constructed languages floating around, Lojban is the most well-known, and in my opinion, the most well thought out. What is so great about it? The grammar is unambiguous. That means you never have words like two, and two. Never happens. There's only one way to interpret the grammar and the words. People can derive different meanings from your words, and you can make your language ambiguous if you want, but the language itself does not get in your way. Lojban is designed to be culturally neutral. I think it would be really cool if the world were united under one language. Currently, the most popular contender for that is English, but English kinda sucks. In fact, it's one of the hardest languages to learn as a second language. So while it may be the most popular, it's not the best. And the problem is, when you learn a new language, you generally have to get to know about some of the culture surrounding the speakers of the language during the process. Certain words need to be put in a cultural context to make sense. And it's not a bad thing to learn about other cultures. I find it very fascinating, but when you propose an international language, be it whatever, you're going to have to deal with a lot of resentment from other cultures. Why should we have to learn their language? They should learn ours! Those are legitimate concerns for an international language. But Lojban avoids this by being culturally neutral. You can express whatever aspect of whatever culture you like. It is the uniting language. It's derived from the 6 most popular spoken languages at the time it was created, which are English, Spanish, Chinese, Russian, Arabic, and Hindi. The words are all formed from these 6 languages. A multilinguistic cognate. And all the words are formed like this, meaning that if you speak one of these 6 major world languages, you're going to be pretty familiar with most of the words in the language already. Imagine all the wars we could prevent if we had a clear communication system like this between all nations. The Lojban spelling system is 100% phonetic, which means every letter has one sound. You cannot make a mistake with spelling or pronunciation. If you know how to say it, you'll always know how to spell it. If you know how to spell it, you'll always know how to say it. The only downside is that you can't have spelling bees in Lojban. Just wouldn't work. Lojban is very easy to learn, especially compared to natural languages. When you learn a rule in the grammar, there are never any exceptions or irregularities. So the grammar is very easy to learn. And the vocabulary is extremely easy. There's a little over 1,300 root words. But these words represent core concepts, and these concepts, these 1,300 words, can be combined to form a vocabulary of millions of compound words. And you can make new words yourself. This is encouraged. This is how the language removes restrictions on freedom of thought. First, it removes cultural bias from the equation. Then it allows you to form a large vocabulary from a small one. And the cool thing is, you can go beyond just being fluent in the language. You can actually learn every single word there is to learn. And this means that no concepts are really foreign to you. Well, you can be introduced to limitless new compound words, but with the compound words, if you know the roots, you've got at least an idea of what they mean. See what I'm saying? You can be introduced to limitless new concepts, but no word will be fundamentally foreign to you. So without further ado, let me introduce you to some basic Lojban. The first thing to do is get the letters down. Let's start with the vowels. There are 6 vowels in Lojban, including Y, which is always a vowel. Here they are. Here are the sounds. A as in father, E as in bet, E as in beat, O as in boat, U as in boot, and as in love. A, E, I, O, U, These vowels are completely regular. They do not change. They will always make these sounds. Also, be sure you're not trailing your vowels. What a lot of people tend to do is turn E into A, or O into O. These vowels need to be pure sounds. This is very important. Now let's see what we can do by combining them. When you combine vowels, that's called a dipthong. Let's check it out. Well, we can put A and E together to form I. A, E, I, I. We can also make ow, a, ya, ye, yi, yo, you, oi, wa, we, we, wo, woo. Now that's 14 vowel combinations you can make. Now let's look at the consonants. We've got 17 consonants excluding H, Q, and W. H is replaced by another character, which we'll get to in a second. Q is really just a K, usually with a U after it. So we can just use K. And W is really just a U being used as a dipthong. So we can just use a U. The rest of the letters pretty much stay the same. C makes the SH sound, as in ship. This is actually an independent sound all its own. G is always pronounced G as in gum, never J as in Jim. J is pronounced J as in measure. If you want to make the English J, you put a D in front of it. D, J, J. And finally, the most infamous letter, X, which makes the H sound, as in Bach or Ahmed. This is the only one that's not in the normal English dialect, but it just takes some practice. Finally, the other characters. You've got the apostrophe, which replaces the H. The reason for this is because H isn't really a vowel or a consonant, more of a breath. The apostrophe is only used to separate vowels, so instead of A, you say ehi. Instead of yeah, you can say ihe. Then there's the period. This is simply a stop. It can be as long or short as you prefer. But when it appears, you must stop. It cannot be ignored. It is a letter, treated with some respect. So, this is often to separate vowels as well. So instead of A, we get e. Instead of yeah, we get e. And finally, the comma. The comma also separates vowels, but not with a stop and not with a breath. It separates them with a glide. Look at the name Pierre. In Lojban, this would be written something like this. But if we write it like this, people are just going to pronounce it Pierre. We want it to be pronounced Pierre. So this is how we do that. And the comma is really only used in names. But if you have a name like Pierre, it can be very helpful. And that's it. That is the Lojban alphabet. It has 26 letters and no special characters. This is to create isomorphism, which means audio-visual synchronization. Every letter has a sound, every sound has a letter. And see, special characters, they don't have this kind of synchronization. Nobody says, Bob, left parentheses, who was a man, right parentheses. So why should writing have this advantage over speech? So what Lojban does instead is to create little words to stand in for special characters, like to and toy, left and right parentheses, and lu, lihu, quote and unquote. And they're really not as annoying as you'd think. Now, there are exceptions for certain things like names, numbers, equations, quotes from a foreign language, including coding languages and URLs. These things pretty much need special characters to work. So there are special words to basically quote them into the language. Spaces aren't even necessary, just like when you're writing code for a website. Spaces are neglected by the computer, so that means you can have no spaces at all, or a million spaces if you want. To a computer, it won't make a difference, but it might annoy some people reading it. But spaces can be used to emphasize and help organize parts of your writing if you want. Just an interesting little thing. Now, to the basics of the grammar. There are no nouns, verbs, adjectives, or adverbs in Lojban. There are subjects and predicates. In Lojban, predicates are called sobris, and subjects, or arguments, are called sumti. And the entire thing, essentially the sentence, is called a bridi. So sobri are predicates, sumti are subjects, and a bridi is a subject or set of subjects connected by a predicate. It's the whole thing. Technically, though, a predicate just says something about the subject. It doesn't have to be an action, at least not in Lojban. For instance, la Bob, la indicates a name, and yes, that's how you spell Bob. Prenu. Bob is a person. Prenu is the sobri, and the definition of prenu is X1 is a person or people. Keep in mind, Lojban doesn't make an automatic distinction between singular and plural words. All the words act like the word sheep. You can have one sheep or a group of sheep. The word doesn't change. You can make a distinction if you want. You can say pa prenu, one person, re prenu, two people. You can say gierzupe prenu, a group of people, or you can say nahepa prenu, a not one people, as in plural people. But until you specify, it can be singular or plural. All Lojban words have this place structure. The sobri acts like cup holders for the sumti. You can have up to 5 sumti, 5 cup holders in one sobri. Prenu is pretty simple, it just has one cup holder. So you just stick labab into the first place, and you have a sentence or a bridi. Before you get bored, let's go over some of the fun words, attitudinals. They express attitude or emotion, such as the word wow in English. Wow expresses surprise, and it's a lot easier to say wow than I'm surprised, and it's a lot more fun. So Lojban takes this to the extreme. There are these little words like that for nearly every emotion you can think of. Let's go over a few. We means happiness. Weenai means the opposite of happiness, sadness. You means love. Unai means hate. Aho means hope. Ahonai means despair. Ahu means interest. Ahunai means repulsion. And ahushuhi, lack of interest, means boredom. There are other modifiers like sai and shy. Sai means strong emotion, and shy means intense emotion. We sai means I'm very happy, and we shy means I'm extremely happy, and the happiest I've ever been in my life. There's also pei, which asks a question about someone's emotions, such as we pei, are you happy? And dai, which says that you feel the emotions of someone else, you feel empathy for them. We dai, I feel happy for you. If there's no person in front of the attitudinal, then it's assumed to just be the speaker's emotion. These words can also be used to modify other words, such as the sentence, mi klama, I go. Mi klama a, I have an obligation to go, I must go. Mi klama we, I happily go. Mi klama you, I lovingly go. These are really cool words. You should really look up the rest. And ironically, it makes expressing your emotions much more natural than in most natural languages. And this isn't actually an attitudinal, but there's a word called It means, hold on, I'm thinking. With multiple places, a sobri can describe a relationship between multiple sumti, such as in the word gerku. X1 is a dog of species or breed X2. So let's see what we can do with this. If we saw a dog on the street walking by, we could say, ta gerku, that is a dog. Ta gerku la beagle. I'm just using the English name as beagle for an example, so you can start to see how this place structure works. Let's try something harder. The word dunda means X1 gives X2 to X3. So we've got the giver, the gift, and the receiver. So we could say, labab, dunda, ti, this, lajan. Labab, dunda, ti, lajan. Let's try this out with some pronouns, or prosumti as they're called. So most people are thankful we have pronouns because saying me and you is a pretty easy way to refer to people rather than call them by their names every single time. So let's see what words Lojban uses for this. Well, there's me, which means me, the speaker. It can also be plural, as in me and the people I represent. Then there's do, which means you, the audience. It can refer to one person or multiple people. Optionally, you can say rodo, which means all of you, to make it plural. There's also ko, which commands someone to do something like ko, klama, you, go, do that thing. There are a lot of ways to refer to people in third person, but the simplest is to use zohe, which means something unspecified, it. So we could say, mi dunda zohe do, I give it to you, or do dunda zohe mi, you give it to me, or mi dunda zohe zohe, I give it to it, or zohe dunda zohe mi, it gives it to me, zohe dunda zohe zohe, it gives it to it. There's no he, she in Lojban because it can oftentimes be sexist and there's just no reason for it. Calling someone it doesn't have a negative connotation in Lojban. Zohe can be used for inanimate objects, animate objects, male, female, doesn't matter. Zohe covers it all. There are a few other prosumti to cover as well. Miho means we, as in me and you. Mi, do, miho. Miho is first and second person. Miha means me and someone else, but not you. Miha is first and third person. Doho means you and someone else, but not me, second and third person. And maha means me, you, and someone else, first, second, and third person. So these words overlap. And you can be more specific because it turns out we can mean a lot of things in English. Now, there are a lot of ways to refer to people in third person. Third person could refer to nearly any person in the world. The four main words in English are he, she, it, and they. Well, Lojban doesn't use gender, so he and she are gone, and it doesn't distinguish when something's plural, so the word they is gone. We're only left with it. And when you're trying to tell a story with many different characters in third person, this gets pretty confusing pretty quickly. So there are a few different methods for dealing with this. First is to use these words. Koha, kohe, kohi, koho, kohu, and foha, fohe, fohi, foho, fohu. Koha means it one, kohe means it two, and on until you get to it 10. What you do is assign these words with a word called goy. For instance, la Bob, goy koha, dunda zohe la John, goy kohe. Bob, aka it one, gives something to John, aka it two. Ikoha pendo kohe. It one is a friend of it two. So say you're writing a story. You can give people a specific pronoun at the beginning of the story, and every time you say that word, it will always refer back to them specifically. Now, this is great for writing when you have time to assign people these words. But what about speaking? Active communication. It's a little much to do on the fly. Well, there's another method. You can use people's initials as pronouns. So how do you say letters in Lojban? Well, for consonants, you just put a Y after the letter. So the word for B is ba, C is sha, D is da, and on like that. For vowels, you put bu after the letter. So we have abu, ebu, ibu, obu, ubu, abu. Also, the apostrophe is aha, the period is dababuhi, which means wait letter, and the comma is slakabu, which means syllable letter. Now, the apostrophe, comma, and period are only used to separate vowels, so you don't use them as the first letter of someone's name. So instead of saying la Bob, duna zohe la John, if your audience is already aware of their names, you can say ba duna zohe da. Also, you can use za in place of zohe, but it's not really formal. A couple other ways are to use ri, ra, ru. Ri refers back to the last sumti said, ra refers to a recent sumti before the last one, and ru refers to a remote past sumti. Ri is used pretty often. Ra and ru aren't really preferred because they're kind of ambiguous. Also, there's ti, ta, tu. Ti means this, ta means that, and tu means that yonder. So they can also mean this person, that person yonder. As long as you can point to it, you can use these words to describe it. But it has to be something in the physical world. It can't be like an idea. So that's how you refer to people in third person. A lot of different ways, but for good reason. Let's move on. Vishnu has 4 places. X1 sells X2 to X3 for cost X4. So you could say, Mi Vishnu ti do lipano. I sell this to you for $10 or euros or 10 of some currency. Here we go. The maximum amount of places. Klama has 5 places. It means X1 goes to X2 from X3 by route X4 by travel means X5. Mi klama ti ta lipano lokarsha. So this means I go to this from that by route number 10 by car. And you actually don't need klama to come right after the first one. It does need to come somewhere after the first sumti, because then me could get confused for the second place. But you can't actually put it anywhere after that, and it won't make a difference. You could say, Mi tita lipano lokarsha shu klama. I to this, from that, by route 10, by car, go. Just more freedom to the speaker. And I'll explain some of these words in a minute. So now we're going to learn about another series of words called fa, fe, fi, fo, fu. These words allow you to jump around the place structure. Fa jumps to X1, fe jumps to X2, fi jumps to X3, fo jumps to X4, and fu jumps to X5. So I could say, you can do all kinds of combinations with these. Another series like this is se, te, ve, and he. These words swap the place structure. Se swaps X1 with X2, te swaps X1 with X3, ve swaps X1 with X4, and he swaps X1 with X5. And you can actually attach them to the word itself by putting an L at the end. Except for te, which you put an R. The reason for this is pretty stupid. Apparently there's a word called stella, which means lock, and the short form of stella is tel. So tel was already taken up, and they used ter instead. Who cares about stella? This is a pretty important part of the language. I say we take tel away from stella and use it for this. So if I were to say le klama, you take the first place, which is X1 goes. So le klama means the goer. However, le sel klama means the destination. Le ter klama means the origin, the starting point. Le vel klama means the route, and le hel klama means the vehicle. Now you can see why the place structure is very helpful. You can turn one word into 5 words at max. And even if you don't know what cell klama or vel klama mean, you can still guess if you know what klama generally means, which is to go. So you would know that it has something to do with going. Now what are these L words I've been using? Well, there are 5 main ones. La, le, li, lo, lu. Le and lo mean the and a. So legeaku mean the dog or dogs. Logeaku means a dog or a group of dogs. Lo means this is the first time I'm referencing this, and le refers back to a previous reference. Now le and lo have a word called ku. This word is a terminator. It ends it like le or lo began it. Like parentheses. This is so words don't bleed into each other. For instance, if I said legeaku klama, what I mean to say is the dog goes. But what this is saying is the dog type of goer. When 2 root words are put together like this, it forms a compound word called a ton root. For instance, Melby means beautiful and Zdani means house. So Melby Zdani means beautiful house. Likewise, legeaku klama means the dog goer. So to make it what we want, which is the dog goes, we can put ku in between them. Legeaku ku klama. Another way to do this is to put shu, which means that there is an upcoming celebrity. It essentially is just a separator. Legeaku shu klama. Either one of these will work. I think shu is a little more nicer of a sound, and I think it's generally used more often, but it's up to you. And you only have to use them if 2 words are going to run into each other. Alright, la. La indicates a name. It means the one known as, or the one named, such as la Bob, the one named Bob. You must always put a stop at the end to prevent the name from running into the next word. And if your name begins in a vowel, you must put a stop before it as well, such as la Ed. Multiple names are separated by pauses, such as La Ed Jones. A little note, there is no TH sound in Lojban because most people in the world can't say it. They'll usually replace it with a D or a Z, and you don't really want an international language to have a sound that most people around the world can't say. Capital letters are used in names to indicate stress, such as the name Juliet. This name can have many different pronunciations depending on where you live. The English pronunciation is Juliet. The French pronunciation is Juliette, and Americans might say Juliette. So you never have to mispronounce or misspell someone's name again. That's nice. Now there are 2 different types of names, meaning names and sound letter names. A meaning name would be something like mom and dad. These words have the associated meaning of being someone's parents. Many cultures create names that have a distinct meaning like this. Then there are sound letter names. When you call someone Frank, it doesn't necessarily mean that they are a form of hot dog. In many languages, like English, we tend to just assign letters and sounds to a person as their identifier. Lojban allows for both these types of names. For meaning names, you can just use Lojban words. For instance, if you wanted to call someone Happy as a name, you would say La Glekiku. Now with non-meaning names, you tend to Lojbanize the letters and keep the sounds the same, such as La Mary. But here we have a problem. How do we distinguish between what is a meaning name and what is a non-meaning name? Well, since all Lojban words end in a vowel, it was decided that non-meaning names could be distinguished by having them all end in a consonant. So La Mary would be La Marine or La Maris. Usually an N or an S are used, since they tend to be short sounds. And non-meaning names don't need a terminator, just a stop at the end. Now, if you have a name that ends in a vowel that you don't want to add a consonant to, then you can use the word that I created called lahai. Lahau quotes meaning names and terminates with lihu to create meaning names that are a bit more complex, and lahai quotes non-meaning names and terminates with lehu, and you use a period to separate multiple names. Lahai can quote words ending in vowels or consonants, and both of these words can be very useful. There are also words called shoy and doi. Shoy means hello, and doi means hey you. It's used to address someone. So you could say shoy Ed or doi Ed. You could say shoy lahau gleki lihu, hello Happy, or doi lahai Mary Shelley lihu, hey Mary Shelley. So there's a word called laho which allows you to quote foreign names, names outside of Lojban. So if you want to keep the original spelling or pronunciation, you can do this. Though unless you're certain that your audience is going to understand your language, it's best to use Lojban spelling and pronunciation. So this is how you use laho. What happens is that you set your own quotation mark, as in laho glisho jo, glisho. Glisho means English. After laho, the next word you say becomes the quotation mark. So whatever is inside those 2 glishos is understood to be from the English language. You can really use any Lojban word you want as your quotation, And the reason for this is so you can really quote anything you want. Say your name is Glisho. Well, Laho Glisho, Glisho, Glisho doesn't really work because you're ending it before you really want to. So you could just set it as something else. You could say Laho, Laho, Glisho, Laho. And also remember, you have to put stops to separate it. Also for brevity, you can just use the letter that your language begins with, such as Laho, Ga, Joe, Jones, Ga. Alright, now on to numbers. Numbers are extremely elegant in Lojban. Li indicates an upcoming number or equation. It does not have a terminator because it doesn't really need it. Just when the numbers stop, that's it. Li also allows for special characters. You can use real numbers and math signs because that makes math a lot easier. But let's get into the writing system for numbers because it's really awesome. So the 10 digits are no, pa, re, shi, vo, mu, cha, ze, bi, so. You'll notice it follows the a, e, I, o, u pattern. So what is 10? Well, 10 is pano, pa, no, 1, 0. 11 is papa, 12 is para, and so on. And if you want to separate them, you can say pa, ere, eshi, 1 and 2 and 3. This prevents them from being read as pareshi, which would be 103. This means that after you learn the names of these 10 numbers, you know the entire number system. 100 is panono, 200 is renono, 1000 is pananono. Now as you can see, it does get cumbersome to say pretty quickly, which is why they have shortcuts, which you don't have to use, but it makes it a lot easier. Kiho means 1,000. It sounds a lot like kilo as in kilogram, kilometer. If there's nothing in front of it, kiho is assumed to mean 1,000. You can also say pa kiho if you want, but you don't have to. Kiho can kind of be used like the comma or the period between thousands and millions and billions and so on. You can say shi kiho re kiho pa, 3,000, 2001, which would mean 3,000,000,2001. There are higher units as well. Megdo is 1,000,000, gigdo is 1,000,000,000. It keeps going up to a septillion and down to a septillionth, which is the same as the metric system. Now what about if you want to use base 12 or base 16 with this system? Well, the Lojban numbers actually go up to 16. There are 6 extra numbers, dao fe gai, zhao he vai. He used to be re, and you can still use that number, but he is preferred because re can be confused with re, so instead of stopping at so, you just move on to higher units. Other mathematical signs are p, which means point, like pa pi pa, 1.1. Nihu is the negative sign, suhi is plus, vuhu is minus, pihi is times, and fehi is divided by. Du means equals, and pi is pi. So you can write out numbers very elegantly, but it's still helpful to visually represent math. It's just one of those things that kind of needs a separate system to help people understand it. Keep in mind, you'll still use these names for the numbers, so they may look different, but it's still going to sound the same. And with Li, you can perfectly use either the fantastic writing system for numbers or more visual representation. Finally, there's Lu. Lu is a quotation mark. It means quote. Lihu means unquote. So let's take a word like shusku. X1 says X2 to X3 via expressive medium X4. So we're just going to ignore the last 2 places. Mi shuskulu shoy lihu. I say hello. But this has to be formal Lojban. To use utterances or onomatopoeia, you can use bashru. There's also a word called zoi. Zoi quotes a foreign language, a language outside of Lojban. This is where laho is derived from, but laho is specifically for names. Zoi can be used for anything. There's also zohoi, which is for quoting one word from a foreign language. Same way lahoi quotes one-word names. So I could say, Mishusku zoiga, hello to you, ga. Or Mishusku zohoi, hello. Zoi can also be used to quote coding languages, emails, even URLs. For that, you would want to use skami, which means computer, zoiskami, facebook.com, skami. Or for short, zoisa, facebook.com, sa. It's understood that this kind of stuff needs special characters, which is why Zoi is there to do its job. Also, if you're not sure of what language a quote comes from, you can say Zoi Zoi Zoi. Very cool word. Any questions? Oh, you don't know how to ask them yet. Okay, there's no who, what, when, where, or why questions in Lojban. There are 2 types of questions, true, false, and fill in the blank. Seriously. True, false is asked by the word who, as in, Chudonel shila Bob? Is it true or false that you like Bob? Do you like Bob? You can answer by saying Nelshi or na Nelshi. I like, I don't like. Or with gohi, which means repeat the last statement. More specifically, the last celery. And nagohi, we repeat the last statement, but put na in front of it, which means no. To the contrary, fill in the blanks are asked by two words, ma and mo. Ma asks about a missing sumpti, mo asks about a missing celebrity, such as ma nelshi la Bob, who likes Bob, or do nelshi ma, you like who or what, or do mo la Bob, what is your relation to Bob? How do those words connect? If you just want to ask a straight up, what? You can say mo. Other forms of questions can be formed through this simpler system. What about words like and, but, or? Well, these words are called connectives because they connect words. There are 5 main connectives, a, e, I, o, u. And they all have periods before them, since any word that begins in a vowel must have a small stop before it to prevent the previous word from bleeding over into the next one. A means and or, as in ata, this and or that, one, the other, or both. E means and, as in ata, this and that. Pretty straightforward. O means if and only if. If has 2 different forms in English. There's the strong if and only if, and the soft if. So if you say a sentence like, we won't go outside if it's raining, do you mean that rain is the only thing that can stop you from going outside? Or that you may go outside, but definitely not if it's raining? Well, O takes the stronger form, if and only if. For the soft if, use the celebrity shumki, which means x1 is possible under conditions x2. x1 is a maybe. Then there's onai. Nai means the opposite. So onai means if not, which means the same thing as or. Ti onai ta. This if not that. This or that. And I don't think it has a direction, so it could be used as that or this as well. So onai is or. Specifically if you're making a choice, like this or that, not both. For that you would use a. U means whether or not. Again, pretty straightforward. And E is the sentence separator. It's equivalent to the period. You say E at the beginning of sentences to separate them. You don't have to say it at the beginning of the first sentence you say, even though you technically can. And if 2 people are talking back and forth, when one person starts talking, they don't have to use it. But the next sentence they say will. It's not as annoying as you'd think. We basically do the same thing with the word and, like I went here, and then I went there, and then I came back, and then I did this. But E is a lot shorter to say. It's barely noticeable, but it is there to create audio-visual synchronization. And where is the word for but? Well, and but are really saying the same thing. x1 is true, and x2 is also true. But just has a negative connotation to it. There is a word for it, though, which is kuhi. It means however. There's also kuhinai, which means therefore. But these aren't really used the same as other connectives. They're more of just observations. So you can say like ikuhi, and however, ikuhinai, and therefore. There's also a word called niho, which means new paragraph. You do not have to use this on the first paragraph you say, but you will on every paragraph after the first one. Niho is basically like the word so. So, it starts a new topic. Now these words, a, e, I, o, u, are to connect sumpti, as in, mi dunda ti eta do. I give this and that to you. But to connect celebrity, you use ja, je, jo, and ju. These words form a compound word between 2 or more celebrity through these connectives. So, mi klama, je dunda, je pensi. I go and give and think. If these connectives were taken out, it would mean mi klama dunda pensi. I goingly, givingly think, whatever that means. Also, these words can be used to cut out a lot of unnecessary time from your speech. Mi klama, je dunda, je pensi is a lot more brief to say than mi klama, mi dunda, mi pensi. There's no reason to start new sentences and say the same words over and over again. Though if you want, you can connect sentences. You just put an E in front of these. Ija, ije, ijo, iju. So mi klama, ija mi dunda, ija mi pensi. It takes a little longer to say, but it means the same thing, and can be very helpful. It should be noted that you don't really need ija much, because all it means is the first sentence I'm speaking is true, and the next one is true. But it's just kind of assumed that what you're speaking is true, so you should really only use it if you want to show a connection between 2 events or ideas. Finally, there are forethought connectives. What we've learned about so far are afterthought connectives. They happen after one of the terms you want to connect has been said. They happen in between terms, ti, eta. The connective and happens in between this and that. But what if you want to say you're going to make a connection beforehand, like if this, then that? Notice if comes before. It can be nice to give your audience a heads up sometimes. So there are the four thought connectives, ga, ge, gi, go, gu. Gi is your mediator. It goes where the connective normally would have gone. Ga is and or, as in ga ti gi ta. Ge is and, as in ge ti gi ta. Go is if and only if, as in go ti gi ta. And gu is whether or not, as in gu ti gi ta. These words are just to let you know that I'm going to make a connection coming up. How do you express tense in Lojban? Past tense, present tense, future tense. Well, Lojban words don't have any conjugations, so instead you use three little words called pu, sha, and ba. These words mean past, present, and future tense. Mi klama. By itself can mean I went, I'm going, or I will go. But we can add these words in here and be specific. Mi pu klama, I past go, I went. Mi sha klama, I present go, I'm going. Mi ba klama, I future go, I will go. Now say you're writing or telling a story and it's in past tense. You don't have to say pu over and over. One time will be enough. If you establish once that your story is in the past, your audience can then assume that the rest of it takes place in past tense, unless of course you change the tense. There's another word which is extremely important, which is called be. When you're making complex sentences, you've got to know this word. So say I have the sentence, mi klama fulo marsha, I go by a vehicle. But marsha has a place structure of its own. X1 is a vehicle carrying X2 in or on surface or medium X3 propelled by X4. So what if I wanted to say who the vehicle was carrying within this sentence? This is what be is for. It attaches sumti to other sumti. So I could say, mi klama fulo marsha be mi. There's also be, which links to another place within the same subree. See, if you kept using be, it would keep going deeper and deeper into place structures of place structures and spiral into chaos. There's also a word called me, which turns a sumti into a subree, as in melabab. So this would take the form X1 is Bob in aspect X2. Other random words, pehu means please, eho means request, and kihem means thank you. Shuhei indicates a change of speaker within a quotation. So this is going to be very useful if you don't want to keep saying like he said, then she said, and use lu and lihu over and over and over again. Shuhei is very helpful to just change from one speaker to the other within one quotation, and is very useful with large dialogues. Now what if we want to kind of diverge from a subject or give more information about a statement within the same sentence? This is what by words are for. They're essentially prepositions. So, for instance, I could say, mi shusku, I speak. But what if I wanted to say in what language I was speaking? I could use the by word bow, coming from bangu, which means language. So I could say, mi shusku bao lojbobao. I speak in Lojban. You can actually turn any subree into a byword with the word fijo. So I could say, mi shusku fijo bangu lojbobao. Not all words have a by form, so this can be very useful. Another word class that is useful is fuhivla, which means loan word. They can be used for slang, jargon, nonce words, words borrowed from other languages. There are some rules for fuhivla. 1, they must contain a consonant cluster in the first 5 letters, and it must be a permissible consonant pair. 2, it must end in 1 or more vowels. 3, it must not be a root word, compound word, structure word, or any combination of these forms. 4, it cannot contain a y. 5, they're always stressed on the second to last syllable. So yes, there are some regulations, but besides that, anyone is free to make any of these words that you want at any place and any time, which is epic. And the final word type that I have to teach you about in Lojban is compound words. These are the basis for the expansion of Lojban grammar. You can create so many concepts beyond the 1300 root words by compounding them. So putting 2 or more subree together makes a tanru. Bardamlatu means big cat. What if you want to say big white cat? We can say Bardablabi mlatu, but here we run into an issue. Lojban follows what's known as a left grouping rule. The left word modifies the right word, as we see in the first example. But with this same rule applied to these words, we end up with a big type of white type of cat, which isn't really what we want to say. Now there are a couple of solutions to this. You can use the words ke and kehe to put the words in parentheses, such as Barda keblabi mlatu kehe. But we can just really drop the right parentheses. We don't really need it. So we get Barda keblabi mlatu. This works. We can also use the word bo This works like a dash. It attaches two celery together, as in barda blabi bobnato. Either way works. It's up to you which one you want to use. Now you can see that the terms are getting pretty long to say. Luckily there's a solution. Nearly every gismu root word in Lojban has a shortening called a rafsi, which means affix, prefix or suffix. These are all three main letters and most are one syllable. When you combine two of these shortenings together, it's called a lujvo. There are special lujvo that are created by members of the Lojban website where they change and combine different words' place structure to make a more useful term. While an individual can technically do this, it's best to leave this place structure the same as the last rafsi. This is how Tanru work, and it's how your lujvo should work if you want people to comprehend what you're saying. Sel, ter, vel, and hel are rafsi themselves. The rafsi for ke is kem, kehe is kep or kehe, and the rafsi for bo is bor. So let's make a lujvo. We can take a term like hamgu, which means good, and prenu, which means person, and combine them together. Well, prenu shortens to pre, which is a good thing because if the rafsi doesn't end in a vowel, you have to use the full form of the word at the end. Hamgu shortens to hag and how. You can use either one, so let's try hag. Hagpre. But what's this? We have two consonants that cannot go together. There are certain consonants that don't work together. These are double consonants, two of the same consonant, two consonants that are voiced and unvoiced, purely consonants that require or do not require phonation. The letters L, M, N, and R are exempt from this rule since they can be pronounced either way. You cannot have two consonants together from the set C, J, S, and Z. And the specific pairs CX, KX, XC, XK, and MZ are not allowed. So any of these types of consonant pairs are not allowed, including the one we've just made. So what we can do is put a Y in between them to buffer from one consonant to the other. So the word turns from hagpre to hagapre. Let's try another one. We could say hamgu fanmo. Hamgu shortens to hag and how, so let's try how this time. Fanmo shortens to faho, so we could say how faho. But this word lacks a consonant cluster. See, structure words take the same form of some of these rafsi. Faho is also the structure word for an unconditional end of text. Well, we don't want to end the text, so the way we distinguish from structure words and rafsi is by having a consonant cluster, at least two consonants together, that structure words lack. But this doesn't have a consonant cluster. What are we to do? Well, we shall make one. We shall turn how faho into hour faho. This resolves the problem. R is the standard character for doing this, but if needed, the N can be used as well. The language really works for you instead of you working for it. And that is all the basics. You should basically know how to speak the language now. For further information, I would read Lojban for Beginners, and for really hardcore fans, check out the Lojban Reference Grammar, which documents everything about the language. It's basically the language contained in one book. If you want to search for words, you can look at za'u, the official Lojban dictionary, and Vlasisku, which has most of the words za'u has, but with a nicer interface. And if you want help learning the vocabulary, I've created a list of flashcards on Quizlet, which contains every single Lojban root word, and I'll link to that down below. And you can play games where you can guess what the words are and all that fun stuff, so it's pretty fun. And one last word before we go. Shoho means goodbye. Shoho.